All right, everyone, welcome to week 11-12 of our um, art course, Digital Art Design. This week we're going to be covering comic books and comic book making, as far as how to use a digital program to create comics. The first thing I want to talk about today is actually talking about comics as art, as far as their purpose and what they should look like. The directions do a fairly good job of walking you through tools to use. So today is going to be less about using the tools and more about sort of the intent of comics and how to go about creating something that's interesting and ultimately useful for your viewers and hopefully for you. So we are going to start by sharing kind of my whole screen here. I'm going to walk you through some examples of comics as art, and then we'll kind of get to using GIMP to do this. So to sort of start with, I have on my screen a lot of different examples of drawn comics, because of course comics, when they started, they were drawn by hand. They were used often as political tools, actually, as a visual media to sort of talk to people who couldn't read that well or didn't have a huge vocabulary, and so they were used as sort of images that told stories. The oldest kind of comics, if you want to think of them that way. I'm actually going to bring up some what we call comics, but there weren't really comics in what we think of today as comics, but they were actually these old lithotype plates. That was a series of like 6 or 8 plates that told the story of kind of this rich couple that were getting betrothed and then married. So it's marriage a la mode is what it's called. And it's a series of 6 plates that sort of follow this young girl and the guy in the corner here, who's actually like more in love with himself than he's in love with her. And it's the parents are getting together, the 2 children, or the adult children, of course, and it doesn't work out. He sort of is, but then, so the story goes through this series of prints, we see that he is very much a squanderer of the family money, and she's very sort of not worth the time and effort of kind of cleaning up after. She's a bit of a mess too. So neither one of them are kind of good people, which is shown through the expression in their faces and sort of the things that surround them. So just going back to this first image, we see that the lordling is looking at himself in the mirror, and he's got this big mole on the side of his neck, so he's very fashionable. At the time in France, this was very fashionable to have moles, so it's probably fake. We see that the dads are talking about money and dowries and like family history, because we have this big scroll of the family tree. So we're learning a lot about the characters based on how they're dressed, what their expressions are, and the objects that surround them, because everything's sort of been chosen intentionally. This was sort of the first idea that images could be put in a series in order to show a story or tell a story. For the unspoken masses, for the people who couldn't read yet, this was a very effective and popular way of telling a story that could all be conveyed through images. So we're also going to look at some other types of images that you can have. So Batman, okay, top left corner here. We have Batman coming up through the tunnel, and you can tell he's like tired and he's like flopping over. So this is a very slow progression of images where it tells just like 5-second story. That's it. And so we're not getting a whole picture, the whole idea, but we are getting a progression. It's almost like slow down film, because so clearly this is taking a long time to happen. Next one down, superheroes, Iron Man, and some villain. Not sure. But we are getting action through this one because we have these like swoop action lines. Um, and so, through this one we have high action. There are other ones like the at the bottom here where we have, larger cuts. We have more time progressing, but we're able to follow what's happening because there's either a continuation of character, in this case, like the car is following along, which we assume is driven by this person at the end, as well as the text that's helping us follow the story. Sometimes there's nonsense. So if we look at the guy in the crown next to the wooden spoon, you look at those two pictures and you go, okay, what's the story here? And so sometimes your audience has to make the connection themselves. They have to figure out, all right, what on earth is happening? Is this guy like the king of the fairies? Like, and this is his magic wand? Like, what's going on? So sometimes it's a leap of faith you have to put on your viewer. Other times you have, just multiple views of the same scene. This one, we are seeing kind of the guy and the girl and on a bus. And so we're just kind of seeing multiple views of the same scene. Nothing's really happening, but we're getting kind of the sense of space. So it's the same kind of tricks that filmmakers do. I put a link in this comic book assignment to watch like a 2-minute clip of Hitchcock talking about juxtaposition, talking about how one puts one image after another, and your audience is going to think one thing, and you do a different set of pictures, your audience is going to think something else. So even just a facial expression change can change a lot as far as what your audience thinks about. This last one here is one that uses just a little bit of text and is mostly done through large images. Your practice image that you would have done, or your practice comic with the directions, would be like a single panel with text. So like down in this one, like the one with the house and the car and the text. Great. That's a great practice. For the final one that you're working on all of this week, I really want you to create a full page of comic. If you're thinking like Sunday comics, that would be at least 4 panels. If you're thinking like comic book comics, it would be a full page. And maybe that would end up looking like something like this, where you have 3 images, but they're a little bit more in depth, arranged in an interesting way. Here is an example of a drawn comic that you could do that I had done for this class earlier. But using the digital program, they're going to look a little different. You, of course, can use drawn information. We've learned how to make drawings, either traced or not traced, in GIMP. So you're welcome to use those techniques that we've learned. But here's how you would go about doing that with the GIMP program itself. So this is my kind of ending comic if I'm going to take some source information and some photograph information and put it together to create a comic with some text in it. Of course, this is just one panel. Maybe I would have another panel where like the door gets slammed in your face or something. The goal though would be to tell some sort of narrative or some sort of story. So maybe Vaporeon, maybe we have a knock knock close in on the door, and then it opens up and Vaporeon says, "Privacy, leave me alone." And maybe I need to add in like a little bubble bath hat here, or some ducks floating in the tub to make a full scene. But this is kind of just to give you an idea. So starting off, we would have whatever your source image is. You would have to go about selecting your image information from that source image. I would recommend choosing some kind of picture or object or person that's on a bright white background. The tools that we're going to be using to do this are a little bit finicky. They are a little bit smart, but a little bit not so good at telling same colors together. So just to give you a quick example, if I wanted to do this horse, okay, I could try I'm going to use the magic wand tool here to attempt to select the horse. And as I drag, all of a sudden, I'm going to also get like the whole background. It's going to think that I really want the whole background and not just the horse. So yeah, it's not going to work all that well because it's very, very, very similar in color. Yeah, so if I click this side of the horse, it's going to want, oh, all this is the same color, therefore you want all of that. Yeah, I don't. So I either have to do a lot of cleanup later, or I just deselect and start again using either a different tool. I could try the lasso tool, I could try the select by color tool, but again, because my colors are so similar, I'm going to have a harder time. Better to find an object on a white background, and most objects you can find a photograph of on a white background. So just to kind of give you an example, if I wanted a strawberry on a white background, I would just type that into Google, I would click images, and I have now a plethora of images to choose from. To select a high quality one, remember, look for those numbers on the image. Make sure that it's at least 500 by 500 and one that you like. Don't save it from here though. Click view image. And sometimes it'll be a stock photo, so I can't actually use this one because you're not going to get a quality version. But other ones, or I'm going to run into a bunch of errors. You're going to run into this too. That's why you kind of keep looking until you find one that's all by itself. Save image as some kind of JPEG, figure out where you want it. I'm just going to throw it onto my desktop so I can find it. And file open. Going to find that file that I just downloaded. There's my strawberry. Okay. So, except I wasn't in GIMP. Let's try that again. Open, open. Downloads and desktop, and where's my strawberry? There it is. Okay. So now I have my strawberry, and now you can see to select this one using that magic brush select, I'm going to sort of click and drag to select the areas I want if I've said sample merged. If it's just on anti-aliasing, it's just going to take one and I can add to it by hitting the plus sign, but not that well. So I'm going to say sample merged. And hopefully it'll start growing the area that I want. So hold down Shift to continue to add to your selected image. So you can see over here in my black and white history, you'll see how much is selected at this point. So right now I've got everything except my seeds selected. And I really want those seeds. So I'm going to keep going and I'm going to get them all. Pretty soon it's going to figure out, oh, you want those? Oh, you want those? Oh, okay. And then it'll add those on. Sometimes the dragging helps it, sometimes not so much. There we go. All right, you can kind of see here now I've got all those leaves and I've got all the seeds, and that's good. The only thing I have that I don't want is this shadow. So for now, I'm going to Control X and Control V onto a new layer, just in the same background, okay? And I'm going to use my eraser tool to get rid of anything that I caught that I don't want. So in this case, I don't want that shadow, So I'm going to erase it. And this is where that zoom comes in handy. I have a big old halo around my whole picture. So I want to make sure that, you know, if this is something that I want to look like it really belongs, that I want to get rid of that halo by going through and erasing that. If I'm okay with having a little bit of halo, if I'm planning on doing some adjustments to my background, then I could probably leave it. So I'm going to say that that's okay. I'm going to leave the rest of it the way it is. So now I'm going to select the whole strawberry layer, this whole thing, Control X, okay, and I'm going to go to my background project layer. So before I added filters, when I'm still adding objects, it's going to look something like that. Oh my goodness, that's like way too big. So let's make sure we don't have anything. Let's get our whole kind of image selected here. There we go. So make sure when you use paste, you paste onto paste and then add a new layer so it gets its own sort of area. And then remember with scaling, we scale it down to the size we want. Drag it, drop it, make it little. Okay, and then enter. Grab that move tool, scoot it up where you want it. Maybe you need to rotate it, maybe you need to scale it some more. Maybe this is a strawberry friend come to visit. I'm not sure. I'm being silly with this. I hope you add some thoughts to what you're doing and why you're doing it. So say I'm happy with my arrangement of my elements now, and I'm ready to sort of comicify this picture. I could make it black and white, so I could go to colors, and then I could go to desaturate and just change everything to a black and white comic. That would end your project looking something like this. So you'd have a number of panels and everything would be sort of black and white, and it would just be photograph information, and that's fine. Another way of doing it, another idea would be to play with the artistic filters. There is one that says cartoon, which I kind of like. I think it's kind of fun. It makes it look like a comic book, and you can kind of decide how comic booky you want it to be, how stylized. So there's my strawberry made into a comic book. And then filter, artistic, cartoonify. I could decide how much I want my bathroom to look like a comic book. Now everything kind of goes together. Now what I'm noticing here is that my strawberry has this box around it from when I did the fuzzy select, and I'm not really loving it. So because it's its own separate layer, I can go back in with my eraser and at least sort of soften those edges or get rid of quite a lot of that. I don't like the way that that's kind of adjusting or changing the colors of the rest of the room. So if you're noticing that, you can fix it. Excuse me. So there is kind of the steps to do that. Now our directions also ask us to make speech bubbles. If you've made a speech bubble in your practice, in your second one, you could choose to do speech squares or speech bubbles again. Again, you would just make a shape and you would make a new layer and fill that layer with color. And then using the lovely text tool, you could start typing. Now, before you start typing, you'll want to make sure you have a color that will show up on the bubble that you made. And I would also recommend that you think about, what kind of font you want. There's a lot of different ones. Pick something that makes sense for you. Something happened. There we go. Let's try that again. Black text. Okay. there's our what we want it to say. And we're going to say, let's see. But our text is still white. It's to lock into being black. There we go. So if you happen to type before you change the text color, it's going to not take, it'll take it on the change for the rest of the text that you type, but the text you've already typed, it won't make the change. So you'll have to highlight and then change the color so that it will show up and have the color that you want. Then you will want to either move the text box or move that. So make sure you're checking your layer list to make sure you are selecting the thing that you want to move. Sometimes if you grab the wrong thing, it's going to kind of move about. But then I wouldn't leave it here. This is still kind of boring. This is the last step that you want to make sure you do is you want your shapes to show up. So we want to make sure that we have a stroke on the outside in a color that will show up and a size that will show up. All right, so that box will help this work. And if you want to take this whole page, so say this is your whole picture and you're ready to kind of make the next panel, if you want to make them separately, this is how you do it. So if I was all done, I would take this image and then I would go to Image, or rather Layers, Merge Down. This is going to cause all of the layers to kind of squish onto each other, so nothing will be movable anymore. If you each one, so if you want to make them all squish down onto each other, we are going to merge visible layers. Now that is under image. So it's going to merge all of them together. It's going to ask if you are sure you want to do this because you can't undo it. And now it's all flattened. So if you look at this picture over here, it's all flat. And now we can take that square select your whole image area, copy it, and on a blank page, you can paste it on its own new layer. Move this one where you want it. Add that script foo stroke to the outside. I went 100% and 100% outside with my opacity, that means see-throughness, and the color I chose was black, but you could choose something else. Okay, so there's my first comic box. Now I could choose to like have another one here, maybe it overlaps or maybe it's separate, and then a third one or little ones in between. How you lay out your comic book page is really up to you. We should see multiple panels though, and our secret code today is going to be sheep. If you are watching the video and you've gotten this far, the word is sheep, S-H-E-E-P. You can submit it to the file or email me or message me. Okay, thank you. So that's kind of the last step of this is we want to get a page that has multiple things of text, multiple images, and multiple kind of combined either stylized filters or black and white. You can kind of decide how you want that to be for what you want to convey. We should have some kind of story or some kind of characters or some kind of a joke that you're telling, and it should come through via combination of image and text. So I hope that I've given you some ideas on how to get started with this. Thank you and have a marvelous day. Let's see.